The pursuit of knowledge, the insatiable human curiosity, pillars of progress, healing, innovation. But what happens when this pursuit crosses a line, when morality is cast aside in the name of science? There are chapters in the history of science that many prefer to forget. Experiments where human beings and even animals became test subjects for disturbing objectives. Prepare yourself. Today we will open forbidden files and delve into the shadows of 5 of the most secret and ethically questionable scientific experiments ever conducted. Our first case takes us to Alabama, United States, in 1932. The U.S. Public Health Service initiated a study called the Tuskegee Study of untreated syphilis in the Negro male. The official objective? To observe the natural progression of syphilis. But the reality was far more sinister. Hundreds of black men, poor sharecroppers, were recruited with the promise of free medical treatment for bad blood, a vague term used for various ailments. They didn't know they had syphilis, much less that the treatment was a sham. For 40 years, these men were observed as the disease consumed them. Even when penicillin became the standard treatment for syphilis in the 1940s, it was deliberately denied to them. The researchers wanted to see the effects of the disease until the end. Autopsies were the end point of the study for many. Imagine the suffering, the slow agony, the betrayal by those who had sworn to protect health. Wives were infected, children were born with congenital syphilis. A trail of destruction left by scientific coldness devoid of humanity. The study was only halted in 1972 after a press leak shocked the world, a legacy of mistrust and pain that echoes to this day. Now, we travel to the dark corridors of the Cold War. In 1953, the CIA launched a clandestine and highly illegal program, Project MKUltra. The objective? Terrifying and ambitious, to develop mind control techniques. CIA agents, often without the subject's knowledge or consent, administered drugs like LSD, barbiturates, and amphetamines. They conducted sensory deprivation sessions, hypnosis, verbal abuse, and even psychological and physical torture. Targets? Government employees, military personnel, doctors, prostitutes, patients with mental disorders, and ordinary citizens. Many were lured into experiments under false pretenses or simply drugged secretly in brothels set up by the CIA itself. What were they seeking? Truth serums, memory erasure, the creation of sleeper agents. They wanted to break the human mind and rebuild it to their will. The accounts of survivors and the few witnesses are fragmented, but they paint a nightmarish picture. Extreme paranoia, loss of identity, deep psychological trauma. Many of the MKUltra records were destroyed in 1973 by order of the then CIA director Richard Helms. But what remains is enough for us to understand the frightening dimension of this plunge into the abyss of the human psyche funded by the state. We step back in time to 1924. Psychologist Carney Landis at the University of Minnesota wanted to find out if strong emotions provoked universal facial expressions. To do this, he subjected his volunteers, mostly students, to a series of intense stimuli. Participants smelled ammonia, listened to jazz, were instructed to look at pornographic photographs, and put their hands in buckets of frogs. Cork lines were drawn on their faces to study muscle movements. But the experiment's climax was, by far, the most disturbing. Each volunteer was presented with a live rat and ordered to decapitate it. For those who refused, and most did initially, Landis pressured them or, in some cases, took their hands and forced the act. For those who still wouldn't do it, he himself performed the decapitation in front of them. The scientific result? Considered insignificant. Landis found no consistent universal patterns. But the ethical result? A disaster. A horrifying example of how scientific authority can coerce individuals into acts of cruelty and cause profound psychological distress, all in the name of a research question. From psychology, we move to the frontiers of physiology in the Soviet Union of the 1950s. Vladimir Demikhov, a pioneering transplant scientist, became world famous and infamous for his experiments with dogs. The most shocking, the creation of two-headed dogs. Demikhov performed over 20 of these surgeries, transplanting the head, shoulders, and forelegs of a puppy onto the neck of an adult dog. The creations survived for days, sometimes weeks. The transplanted head could lick milk, react to stimuli, while the host's body kept it alive. For Demikhov, these were crucial steps towards the future of vital organ transplantation in humans. And indeed, his work on heart and lung transplants in dogs was fundamental to the development of these techniques. But the image of the two-headed dog became a symbol of the scientist playing God, overstepping ethical boundaries and causing animal suffering in the name of scientific advancement. To what extent do the ends justify the means? Demikhov's experiments, though they contributed to medicine, raise a dark and persistent debate about the value of life and the sacrifices made on the altar of science. Our final case returns us to the United States and the exploitation of the vulnerable. In 1939, at the University of Iowa, speech pathologist Wendell Johnson and his graduate student Mary Tudor conducted an experiment that would become known as the Monster Study. 22 orphan children were divided into two groups. One group of children who already stuttered was told their speech was perfectly normal and was praised. The other group, composed of children with no speech problems, was repeatedly told they were beginning to stutter, that their speech was full of errors, and that they should try hard not to stutter. The result? The children who received positive speech therapy, even those who stuttered, showed improvement or maintained their confidence. But the children who were negatively labeled, whose speech was constantly criticized, developed speech problems. Some stopped speaking almost entirely. They became anxious, withdrawn, afraid to express themselves. Johnson, who himself stuttered, believed that stuttering was a learned behavior, caused by diagnosis and anxiety. He tried to prove his theory, but the cost to those children was immense. The study was hidden for decades, fearing the impact on Johnson's and the university's reputation. Only much later did the university issue a formal apology. A dark reminder of how vulnerability can be exploited, even in environments that should protect. Tuskegee, MKUltra, Landis, Demikhov, The Monster Study. 5 distinct chapters of the same dark story. Science stripped of its moral compass. Curiosity transformed into cruelty. These examples, drawn from different eras and disciplines, force us to question: where is the limit? Who watches the watchers when the pursuit of knowledge becomes a dangerous obsession capable of ignoring suffering and dignity? The scars left by these experiments, on the victims, their families, on public trust, are deep, and they serve as a constant warning. The immense power of science demands an even greater responsibility from those who practice it. History is full of disturbing secrets, and science has not always trodden enlightened paths. What other dark experiments do you know about that you think should be mentioned? Leave your comment below. We want to know your opinion. If you also feel compelled to explore the darkest corners of history and human nature, subscribe to the channel and activate notifications. There is much more to uncover, if you dare.